Hi everyone, I hope this finds you doing well. I wanted to show a demo of the latest feature I've added to Illuminated Cloud. In this case, a first-class integration of SLDS Linter. Now, SLDS Linter is actually a command line that acts as a facade on top of some industry standard static code analyzers, ESLint and Stylelint, as well as some Salesforce specific rules and rule sets for Aura and Lightning Web Components development. And the way that I've integrated this into Illuminated Cloud is bypassing the CLI and instead getting those rules and rule sets integrated directly into ESLint and Stylelint in the JetBrains IDEs. Now, the JetBrains IDEs handle those or support those static code analyzers differently depending upon whether they're commercial, for example, WebStorm here, or they are the free Community Edition IDEs, in this case, IntelliJ IDEA Community Edition. For commercial IDEs, in addition to having first-class support for JavaScript, TypeScript, CSS, there's first-class support for ESLint in Stylelint, so it's a more straightforward integration. For the free commercial edition or community edition IDEs, the same way that there's not first-class support for JavaScript, TypeScript, and CSS, there's not support for those static code analyzers, but we can add them using language server protocol, in particular using LSP for IJ. The same way over the last several months I've enhanced the free community edition IDEs for JavaScript, TypeScript, and CSS via LSP for IJ. So what we're going to do is walk through what it means to get these static code analyzers configured with everything that's needed in the respective IDE types. So we'll go ahead and start with commercial IDE. You may notice in each one of them it's LWC recipes. I've basically freshly cloned these repos, and we're just going to start there and see how it goes. So we'll go ahead and open the settings, and we will go into editor inspections, and under the Salesforce category, there's now an SLDS Linter inspection. Now this isn't a full inspection. It doesn't do any static code analysis. The heavy lifting is going to be done by ESLint and Stylelint. But what it does do is it gives you kind of a guided mechanism for getting all the dependencies in place, making sure they're configured properly and all that, so that ESLint and Stylelint and those Salesforce specific rule sets all work properly. So you're going to start out with mostly X's, maybe all X's to start, and you want to get these to be green check marks, and Illuminated Cloud is going to kind of walk you through that. So the first thing we need to do is get a lot of additional functionality installed via Node, via npm, and so the prompt here is to tell you that it's going to have to upgrade to ESLint 9. Now, the most recent package.json the package.json from the most recent templates laid down by the CLI's project creator, it should use ESLint 9, but that's a pretty recent change. Before that, it would be ESLint 8. I'm sure that's what a lot of people are using. And this is going to upgrade to ESLint 9. If you're not ready for that because you have config files that are very specific to ESLint 8 or whatever, you may need to go and get some upgrades in place before you proceed. But this is just assuming that you're okay moving to ESLint 9. And it's going to install, you can see right here, a lot of packages with specific versions. So it's going to upgrade things that need to be upgraded. It is also going to install things that need to be installed. And so it just got done. These are just warnings about this Sally Jess stuff. Everything actually installed fine. You can see a check mark. Now, if it didn't install fine, obviously when you're talking about dependencies, installing and upgrading dependencies, you can run into dependency conflicts. That's not just true with NPM, it's true with DLLs and with jars and all types of things. You can get into lots of conflicts, whether they're first-class conflicts or transitive conflicts. If that happens, you'll need to go and resolve those yourself, but at the top of this output window, you'll see the specific packages it needs to install, the versions on the ones or minimum versions where it's trying to get to a minimum version. If you can get those so they install fine and get a green check mark here, you can go ahead and move on. Okay, so the next thing we need is kind of a holistic config file for Aura, for LWC, for the presentation tier markup files for those. Now, you may have seen ESLint.config.mjs previously if you played with Illuminated Cloud support for TypeScript LWC development, and those would be under the individual LWC directories. This one is going to get placed in the project group because it is holistic for everything under the project. So we're going to go ahead and create that. Now, you do run a risk of other files being in place, ESLint config files at lower levels, and those can eclipse the functionality that we just created. So we do need to move those out of the way. We need to disable them. So we'll click disable, and it's going to tell us which ones there are. Of course, this came out with LWC recipes. There's one in the root, ESLint config.js, not MJS. And there's an even older ESLint rc.json under the Aura directory. So we need to get these out of the way. We can either do that by deleting them if we just are completely fine with that, or if we want to be non-destructive, we can rename them. I'm actually going to do that, and so those are out of the way, disabled, but they're not deleted. You may also notice that some of these disable once you've achieved the green check mark, and some of them are still enabled, but maybe the label changes. In this case, the label is changed to reinstall, to recreate. It allows you to kind of go through this process again. If, for example, you accidentally uninstalled some of the node dependencies, you can re-execute this. If you accidentally change this config file and it's no longer working properly, you can actually reset to the template. But other ones, it just doesn't make sense to go and move those out of the way because they're out of the way. Okay, now the ESLint inspection as a commercial IDE needs to be enabled and configured, and so this will help to do that. Configured in particular to add the .cmp and .html file extensions so that it'll evaluate those as well, because we're going to have rules for those. Now we've kind of gotten ESLint in good shape. Let's get Stylelint in good shape. So we have to create a Stylelint config file the same way we had to create an ESLint config file. It's going to go in the root directory. So we'll go ahead and create that. So we're good. So that was just created. We can see that over here. We didn't see the ESLint file because it was created down here. And then we need to do the same thing, enable and configure the Stylelint inspection. And so that's good. So we're all green now. We're all green. So we should be able to use this. Okay, so let's just go ahead and take a look. Let's look at some files, some source files over here. Let's expand this and go into Force App, main default, Aura, and we'll go ahead and just open up a component. All right, so we have this .cmp file, and let's go ahead and force an error. So first we'll force like a deprecated class name. So here's one that uses dash dash instead of the underscore. And so it hasn't been highlighted as an error, and there's a reason for that. So if we go down and look, ESLint showing, see this little red exclamation point, we can see what that error is, and it's telling us that it has a parse error. So there's something that's not quite as flexible in its parsing, and it doesn't like white space inside of a closing tag name. So let's look for that, and we can fix that. And there it is. So we'll go ahead and just join this back up here. And now we actually do have something red here. Now, this is being reported by ESLint. One thing I will point out, you see that this message is actually kind of opaque, kind of composite in nature. It's JSON. So it's got the message, and it's got some other information like the suggested class to replace it. This is being reported for Salesforce specific rules in both ESLint and Stylelint. I've reported this on the SLDS Linter public issue tracker, and hopefully they'll fix that. It doesn't necessarily affect the functionality, but obviously it makes it a little bit harder to read. But I can still fix this right here. I can say fix this usage on the current line, and it'll change it to the underscore replacing class name. Now, of course, Illuminated Cloud's had its own code inspection for this for a long time, but it would only work in commercial IDEs. Does the exact same thing. The point is you're seeing this in markup. That's ESLint in markup. Let's move over to JavaScript. So let's force an error here. So we'll just do a good old console.log foo, and we're going to see this get marked up as an error. So there it is, unexpected console statement. So we can go ahead and fix that. So we can remove that console log, and then we can go up here. It's showing another warning, and it's saying it's a redundant suppression. It's a redundant suppression because the ESLint config.mjs file that was created says categorically for Aura that we expect unused expressions, because Aura is based on unused expressions. So you don't want to have to add this suppression every time. Now, if you don't like that, you can change the config file and remove that. I'll show it to you in just a moment. But for now, we're going to remove this current error. And so now everything's in good shape. Now, except for this, which is an unresolvable reference because we haven't added type information to this service that we queried, service component that we queried. But that's kind of beyond the scope of this demo. But otherwise, the ESLint reported things are in good shape. So let's go over to the CSS, and we're going to see some Stylelint reported things. Takes just a second because in the background, the IDE is having to spin up Stylelint language server. But now we have stuff reported by Stylelint. Now here's an example of a Salesforce specific rule. You can see it's SLDS, no deprecated tokens SLDS1, and it's formatted properly. We see the message. If we move through them, all these are. But now here's one that we get that kind of JSON formatted message, and this is is coming from an SLDS Salesforce specific rule. So you can see that we are getting kind of a mix of things that have the correct format and don't. Again, hopefully Salesforce will resolve that where I've reported it in their public issue tracker. But we can see that these things have been reported here. If they had fixes, we could use those. We can actually suppress for the statement, and it'll actually add a Stylelint suppression. So all that functionality is in place. Okay, so that's Aura. Let's move on to Lightning Web Components. We'll go down here and we'll just open up the first component, and we'll go to the HTML file, and we will force the same type of error that we had before. So we will add kind of a deprecated style, and we can see that not only did Illuminated Cloud annotate it initially, that's the fix that's available here, but ESLint did as well, and we can fix that either way. So we can see this in HTML files. Let me point out that there is a bug. It's a known bug reported to JetBrains where things won't be reported by ESLint in HTML files by default in commercial IDEs. And the workaround is you have to go into the registry, and this registry key, ESLint additional file extensions, you have to add HTML. This is all in the release notes. You don't have to remember this from the demo. It's in the release notes. JetBrains says that this is fixed in 2025.1.3, which is exactly what I'm running. 2025.1.3. It's not. If I remove that registry key value of HTML, you won't see this red squiggly underscore. So I've reported that to them. I've said it doesn't appear to be fixed to me. But if you want to see this in a commercial IDE, then just look at the release notes. It tells you how to fix it. But regardless, you can see that that's working here. Let's go to JavaScript. Again, we're going to have to force an error. So I'm just going to say var foo equals bar, and we're going to see some red squiggly underscores here come from ESLint. Some of these externals code analyzers can take an extra second because it's having to start up and run a language server on the back end. It's faster once it's primed the language server. But we can see several ESLint reported things here. var needs to be at the top. Of course, this is ES6 or higher. You shouldn't be using var. You should be using constant let anyway. And you can even see the convert to const there coming from the JetBrains IDE. You can see it saying that foo is unused. Bar is unresolvable. The point is you've got ESLint. We've shown it working in Aura, markup, CSS, JS. We've seen it working in LWC, markup, and JavaScript. We can even go to an LWC CSS file. We'll just go here. And again, it's having to kind of prime this with Stylelint. And then in just a second, we'll see a bunch of Stylelint stuff show up. Yep. And so here's a bunch of Stylelint stuff. So everything's working. This is a commercial IDE. We can see down here, I'm just going to close this up. Here's our Stylelint RC that it created. And you can easily customize this because you have code completion. It's using a JSON schema. So you have code completion for that, for all the various rules. If you've got values that are of a constrained or enumerated type, you can see the candidate values, all that. And similar in our ESLint.config.mjs. And by the way, here's the disabled file where we told it to move that out of the way. You can see the same thing under Aura, by the way. There's the disabled file at the Aura level. But this thing also has completion. Here's recommended. And down here, we've got recommended. Use the import plugins. ECMAScript, we can see the various values for ECMAScript, 15 latest, 10, 5. So these should be pretty easy to configure, and you can see that it's configured already for Aura, for LWC TypeScript and JavaScript, LWC TypeScript JavaScript tests, and test mocks, and then of course the SLDS Linter stuff for the presentation layer files, the .cmp and .html files. And in fact, the one that I was kind of forcing is this enforce BIM usage. Okay, so that's the commercial IDE. Let's move over to the Community Edition IDE, and it's going to be the same thing. I'll even try to go faster through this and skip some steps. But if we open up inspections and go over here to SLDS Linter, we can see that we have a bunch of X's. The only one that we have that's not an X that's already done is LSP for IJ is already installed because we were already using it for CSS and TypeScript and JavaScript in this Community Edition IDE. Now, if it wasn't installed, it would help you install it. Now, one thing I will point out is at the time that I'm recording this demo, the latest release version of LSP for IJ is 0.14.2, and support first class support for ESLint and Stylelint. That has been added in 0.14.3. So if you're trying this out in that little kind of gray area in between before 0.14.3 or higher has been released, you'll need to install a nightly build. And you'll know because it won't actually allow you, even after LSP for IJ is in place, it won't actually enable these create buttons for the language servers because it can't actually create those language servers in 0.14.2 or earlier. So just install a nightly, or ideally, in 2 weeks. This is just released. Okay, so let's install the node dependencies again. And so these will get installed, and as soon as they're installed, we'll come back over and we'll kind of get all the other stuff going. Now the difference here is going to be, whereas before we were enabling and configuring inspections in the commercial IDE, here we're going to be enabling and configuring language servers for LSP for IJ. So we're green on all of our general dependencies. On ESLint, we do need to create that config file. That's done. We need to disable all these other config files. We renamed before, we'll delete this time. Generally, I'd recommend using rename because it's non-destructive, but we'll go ahead and delete. So we're green there. Here's where things diverge. We need to enable the language server, create the language server. So it's going to open LSP for IJ already pre-configured for ESLint. And so we now have an ESLint language server. And now we need to configure that. It is lacking a .cmp and .html, so we want to make sure that we're evaluating those for ESLint. And then on Stylelint, now we're moving on to it. We can create its config file and create the Stylelint language server. And so we're green up and down. So this is a Community Edition IDE. Behaviorally, in just a moment, we should see pretty much the exact same thing, except for like stylistic differences between how the inspection in the commercial IDE displays things versus how the language server in the Community Edition IDE displays things. And we can even go over here and see that we now have 5 language servers. We had 3 before. It added ESLint, it added Stylelint. These are properly installed. We can even leave this open and we can watch them get spun up automatically as we open files that are configured for them. So again, we're going to kind of do what we did before, but we're going to do it more quickly. So CMP, we can see ESLint language server is starting, and we can go over here and where we had that class, we'll go ahead and just add. And we're getting good code completions and all that, and that just went red, so we're good to go. So that one actually didn't fail with the malformed closing tag, so we're good to go there. So we'll go to a JavaScript file and we'll see the exact same thing, console.log foo, and that's going to go red pretty quickly. It just had to spin that up. Should see it go red. There it is. And we can see this is yellow, and we could do the exact same quick fixes. So fix this one and fix this one, remove console.log, and we're basically back in the same situation that we were previously. And on the style file, you can see it is started Stylelint, and now in just a moment, Stylelint will evaluate this and it'll integrate those errors, and there we are. We can see those. So that all looks the same. We'll do the same thing in Lightning Web Components just for the sake of completeness. And HTML, we're going to come over here and we'll say again, SLDS faux, and we'll see that turn red pretty quickly. Yeah, there it is, turned red. Go to a JavaScript file. We're going to force an error here, var foo equals bar. And we'll see ESLint kick in and give us the exact same errors here in just a moment. There we go. All 3 of those. So basically var is at the top. Again, don't use var, use const or let in this context. Foo is unused, bar is undefined. And if we want to bring up star.css and bring up a CSS file, here we are. In just a moment, this will be annotated with Stylelint stuff. So we should see it there. It's all annotated. So exact same thing. And if we go down here to, I'm going to just kind of collapse these. If we go down here to Stylelint RC, it's even though it's a Community Edition ID, it's registered the correct JSON schema for this, so we're getting the exact same code completion capabilities. And same with ESLint config.mjs. Now, one thing I will point out, it's saying that you need to do this, but you don't because this is being handled, is I did have to go into the language server, the TypeScript language server, and add star.mjs as a supported file name. And now we're going to get all the same types of code completions here. The ECMAScript version, you can see the various ECMAScript versions. So again, that is basically the same experience that the commercial IDE had. So that's it. That's what I want to show. Very tight integration of Stylelint and ESLint and the SLDS Linter rules into both commercial and community edition JetBrains IDEs via Illuminated Cloud. So if you see any issues with this, let me know. If you see opportunities for improvement in these config files or bugs in them, let me know. Obviously, if those get rolled back in, I'll certainly be happy to recognize your contributions in the release notes. Otherwise, I hope this helps. I hope it provides a lot of good, useful information directly in line in very close to real time in your Aura and more likely these days Lightning Web Components source files. Thank you for your time. Take care.